revelation from where I sit, because clearly she was trying to put huge pressure on my bosses to take action against me.
Why else are you being sort of suspicious and secretive around labor and birth? And people theorized and claimed that the couple needed time to stage a story because Meghan didn't actually deliver the children.
Piers Morgan says the truth about Meghan Markle's pregnancy is finally catching up to her, and the receipts are uncomfortable.
Attempts like this before, and somehow I remain resolutely uncancelled. But because in the end I was required to apologise for disbelieving Meghan Markle.
At first glance, Meghan Markle's pregnancy announcement felt like a fairy tale moment. A glowing duchess, hand gently resting on her belly, smiling into the cameras like a modern royal dream come true. This was supposed to be simple. Celebrate the baby, smile for the photos, and move on. But almost immediately, something didn't sit quite right, and royal watchers noticed.
Catherine, Princess of Wales, at the time Duchess of Cambridge, appeared outside the Lindo Wing Hospital hours after giving birth, in heels and smiling and holding her newborns.
It started small. One photo here, another there. The bump looked different. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Fuller one week, slimmer the next. Higher in one appearance, lower just days later. Fans tried to explain it away. Angles, outfits, posture, totally reasonable. But then it kept happening over and over, enough that people stopped shrugging and started screenshotting.
Which is ironic, that you should be entitled not to believe somebody if you don't want to.
If you could speak to Meghan Markle today, what would be the tenor, the tone of that conversation, and what would you say?
One of the earliest details Meghan shared, directly or through insiders, was her desire for a home birth. It fit her image perfectly: natural, intimate, calm. Frogmore Cottage was painted as the serene backdrop for this deeply personal moment. No chaos, no hospital hustle, just peace.
And it was sort of expected ever since Princess Diana, who kind of made that a super iconic moment and picture. And Catherine looked fabulous each time. These are just such cute moments.
The public accepted it without question. Why wouldn't they? Meghan had positioned herself as someone rejecting royal rigidity and choosing her own path. A home birth felt like the ultimate symbol of that independence.
Sit down with me, with your husband, for an equally long interview to the one you gave Oprah Winfrey. And let me ask you more difficult questions about all your claims. But let me ask you a wider question, which is this. If you hate the royal family that much...
Then May 6th, 2019 arrived, and suddenly the entire story changed. Instead of Frogmore, Meghan gave birth at the Portland Hospital in London. Now, let's be clear, hospital births are normal, necessary, and often the safest option. No one disputes that. But here's the problem: no one explained the change. Not a single sentence. No mention of medical advice, no evolved plans, nothing. Just silence. And that silence was loud.
Understands that people want to know that she's okay, they want to know that the baby's okay, and it was something that people really loved when Diana did it. People were excited about it.
When you build a narrative so publicly, especially one tied to values like privacy and natural living, people expect at least a brief acknowledgement when it collapses. But there wasn't one. The palace didn't clarify. Meghan didn't address it. The story simply pivoted overnight.
Why do you keep calling yourselves the Duke and Duchess of Sussex? Why? Why would you do that if it's not just to make millions and millions of dollars and playing the victim?
That sudden shift sent people digging backward, re-examining interviews, re-watching appearances, rereading statements. Because when one carefully constructed promise disappears without explanation, it makes people question how much of the story was ever solid to begin with. This is where the internet really went to work. Once people started comparing photos side by side, the bump became the main character, and it was behaving oddly.
To your boss at ITV, what did she say to your boss as it related to you in this coverage?
Well, I didn't even know that Meghan Markle had contacted my boss at ITV. I didn't find that out till I left.
In one appearance, Meghan looked unmistakably pregnant. The bump was prominent, round, undeniable. She cradled it constantly, moved slowly, and lowered herself into chairs with exaggerated care. Days later, sometimes within the same week, there were photos where the bump seemed smaller, flatter, or positioned completely differently.
Really set a new precedent when it comes to privacy, and so if they didn't want to do it, I have full confidence that they wouldn't. I don't see anything wrong with the photo, especially for Catherine and William's children.
Critics pointed out something else: movement. In some clips, Meghan walked gingerly, hands locked protectively around her stomach. In others, she climbed stairs quickly, pivoted easily, and moved with zero visible restriction. Pregnancy affects everyone differently, sure, but the contrast within such short time frames raised eyebrows.
Privately from a lot of people, a lot of support publicly from well-known people, most notably Sharon Osbourne. But look at what happened to Sharon on the talk for defending me and my right to have an opinion, even though she made it clear that she didn't agree with everything I was saying.
This wasn't about one awkward photo. It was about a pattern, a repeating cycle of looking very pregnant when cameras were front and center, followed by appearing perfectly fine when they weren't. Online forums exploded. Comparison videos popped up. Comment sections filled with people asking the same question: how does a bump change that much, that fast?
Hospital in London, and they delayed the photo debut by 2 days. Press and traditionalists criticized this as breaking with royal openness and accused them of controlling the narrative too tightly.
No accusations, just confusion. And confusion is dangerous in the public eye because it invites speculation. Once people feel like they're being shown one version for the cameras and another off camera, trust starts to slip. And when trust slips, the narrative unravels.
And she was accused of supporting someone who had said racist things. It's not racist to disbelieve Meghan Markle. I don't give a damn about her skin color.
If the photos raised eyebrows, the alleged documents blew the roof off. According to claims that surfaced later, internal scheduling notes began circulating, notes that supposedly tracked Meghan Markle's appointments, movements, and engagements during the pregnancy. And if those documents were accurate, they didn't just contradict the public story, they obliterated it.
But I actually see zero issue with Meghan and Harry waiting 2 days to do the photo op and changing the photo op in terms of its dynamic, location, timing, etc. because they're a little bit closer to Princesses Eugenie and Beatrice rather than.
Then came the most shocking detail: hospital appointments logged on days when Meghan Markle was photographed attending events across London. Not close calls. Not timing overlaps that could be explained away. Entire days where the paperwork said one thing and the cameras showed another.
I read a report that said there were 57,000 complaints against you at Good Morning Britain. Do you have any idea of how many were in support of you?
All I can say is there were 7,000 complaints against me.
Then came the bombshell, the day of the supposed hospital arrival. The official narrative described a quiet, discreet entrance, calm, controlled, private. But the documents allegedly placed Meghan Markle somewhere else entirely that day. That's when people stopped saying, "This is odd," and started saying, "This doesn't make sense."
In terms of status, line of succession, the birth of their children had that wiggle room to do it a little bit differently.
Because pregnancy timelines aren't flexible. You can't reschedule being in 2 places at once. And these weren't just rumors, they were alleged records. Whether real or not, the impact was massive because no one denied them. No one corrected them. They just sat there unchallenged and unanswered.
Issuing death threats to them.
Your wife, as the mother bear of the children, was she, did she support you 100%, or did she say, "Piers, don't put us in this line of fire, back off"?
Enter Piers Morgan, loud, unapologetic, and absolutely delighted. This controversy was his playground. On air, he waved papers, referenced timelines, and dissected the story with surgical precision, date by date, appearance by appearance. He wasn't asking gentle questions. He was accusing the entire narrative of being staged.
And she hates the online abuse. But the idea that my sons had to be targeted.
His most explosive claim? Multiple versions of Archie's birth announcement were allegedly drafted before the baby was born. Different scripts, different details, different outcomes, all ready to go. Piers Morgan framed it like this: who pre-writes motherhood like a PR rollout.
In a way that was threatening to them, abusive and death threats and so on. It's completely disgusting.
Have you heard from anyone in the palace?
To him, this wasn't about nerves or privacy. It was about control, image management, optics. He argued that the pregnancy wasn't lived, it was produced. And love him or hate him, one thing was undeniable: Meghan Markle and Prince Harry didn't respond. No denial, no clarification, no pushback. And in gossip culture, silence isn't innocence, it's gasoline.
But here, Meghan kind of created even more controversy around this particular subject because in Oprah,
this is the point where the story stopped being about photos and timelines and started becoming deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people. Meghan Markle later described her pregnancy as a lonely, emotionally draining period marked by neglect from palace staff. She painted a picture of isolation inside a cold, unfeeling institution, unsupported while carrying her first child under intense public pressure. But according to leaked internal memos and insider accounts that later surfaced, the reality behind the scenes may have looked very different.
Netflix, her and Harry's Netflix thing, I covered it in those videos, so I will link those for you up here or at the end of today's video. I'll link those for you at the top of the page.
These documents allegedly showed palace staff being instructed to accommodate every single request Meghan Markle made, and immediately. Not when possible, not within reason, immediately. Staff were reportedly rearranging schedules, canceling prior commitments, and even working double shifts to handle last-minute wardrobe changes and unscheduled demands.
Right after birth. They didn't offer this to Meghan or bring this up to Meghan. And maybe they didn't. I think that it would have been perfectly reasonable for them to not assume that they would want to do a photo right away, in part because, status is different.
One of the most damaging claims involved meetings. According to the paperwork, Meghan Markle declined several invitations to attend briefings or discussions, but later those same absences were framed publicly as being excluded or shut out. Critics argue this wasn't a case of doors being closed, it was a case of doors being offered and not walked through. Piers Morgan seized on this contradiction, repeatedly arguing that this wasn't oppression, it was indulgence. He framed it as an institution bending over backwards, only to later be accused of cruelty anyway.
Also, because Meghan and Harry had already been making huge stinks about privacy and being very difficult to work with, so people were probably like, well, we'll just wait and see what you have to say.
If the memos are accurate, they don't show a woman abandoned by staff. They show staff stretched thin trying to keep her satisfied. That's what shook public perception, because it reframed the narrative from she was mistreated to she was accommodated and still unhappy. Once that possibility entered the conversation, the victim narrative didn't collapse overnight, but it cracked. And cracks have a way of spreading.
They had already proved themselves to be very difficult and very paranoid about their privacy. So I don't think it would have made sense or been reasonable for anybody to suggest to Meghan to do a photo op right after giving birth.
This is where everything got eerily quiet and where the controversy truly escalated. No response from Meghan Markle. No statement from Prince Harry. No carefully worded clarification from a spokesperson. No palace explanation. No celebrity friends rushing in to defend her. Nothing. For someone who had historically been quick to correct narratives, issue rebuttals, or tell her side through interviews and allies, the silence was shocking. Piers Morgan hammered this point relentlessly. Silence, he argued, isn't neutral. It sends a message, especially when specific allegations are being made.
And then that's all the more bizarre if there was some sort of suspicions of surrogacy going around behind the scenes.
Supporters who had once defended Meghan Markle passionately began feeling uneasy. You could see it online. Comments shifted from "this is media bullying" to "why won't she just explain this?" The longer the silence stretched, the louder the questions became.
She also tried to claim and sort of imply in the Oprah interview that, well, if you're not going to give him a title and make him a prince, and you're not going to give him 24/7 police protection the way...
Timelines were reposted, clips were reanalyzed, alleged documents were scrutinized again and again, And with no official pushback, speculation hardened into suspicion.
Those are not her exact words, but that is what she was implying during this segment, during the Oprah interview. So be sure to go check that out for yourself so you can see what you think about that. But that's how I took it.
What made the silence even stranger was Prince Harry's absence. This was the man who built his entire public identity around protecting his family from false narratives. Yet here he was, saying nothing. In scandals, silence can sometimes protect, but in this case, it looked like avoidance. And avoidance in the public eye often reads as guilt, even when it isn't. Once doubts took root, people started revisiting everything, including the Oprah interview that once felt untouchable. Piers Morgan went frame by frame, breaking down Meghan Markle's delivery in a way that made viewers uncomfortable, whether they agreed with him or not.
And what it sounded like she was trying to say, kind of a tit-for-tat thing. Being difficult, being toxic, you know. This just fell right in line with that mixed messaging and the mistakes of the announcements as well.
He pointed out the pauses, the near tears that never quite fell, the carefully timed emotional beats. According to Piers Morgan, the vulnerability felt rehearsed, not fake, but practiced. He then compared that interview to earlier appearances and podcasts. Same cadence, same pacing, same emotional buildup followed by a dramatic release. To him, it wasn't spontaneous storytelling. It was performance.
More time before we get to see the baby, and this coming right on the heels of the fumbled announcements led to even more fuel for those rumors.
That critique resonated because it fit an emerging pattern. The staged photos, the controlled pregnancy narrative, the pre-written birth announcements, the perfectly framed vulnerability. Together, it painted a picture of someone deeply invested in narrative management. Now, to be fair, media-trained individuals do learn how to communicate emotionally on camera. That doesn't mean they're lying. But once viewers started noticing repetition in delivery, it changed how they perceived authenticity.
What happened was Meghan and Harry didn't tell Buckingham Palace right away. When Buckingham Palace got word,
what once felt raw now felt produced. And once the audience starts questioning sincerity, it becomes almost impossible to win them back. Every tear looks calculated. Every pause feels intentional. That's the danger of overcuration. Eventually, even your truth sounds scripted. This was Piers Morgan's most explosive claim, and the one that divided audiences the most. He argued that motherhood itself had become a shield, a powerful one.
6 a.m. actually. So then Buckingham Palace came out 40 minutes later to say, no, he was born already several hours ago. So Meghan and Harry kind of set Buckingham Palace.
By centering her public image around pregnancy and vulnerability, Piers Morgan claimed Meghan Markle created a cultural force field. Questioning inconsistencies suddenly looked cruel. Asking for clarification became attacking a pregnant woman. Criticism transformed into alleged abuse. And culturally, that works.
Like, they were participating in this manipulation, or that they were withholding information, or that they...
Society is trained to protect expectant mothers, to offer grace, to avoid confrontation. Piers Morgan argued that this instinct was being leveraged not accidentally, but strategically. Any pushback against timelines became insensitive. Any questions about staff treatment became bullying. Any doubts at all became misogyny. He didn't argue that motherhood was fake. He argued that it was weaponized, that it became a narrative tool deployed whenever scrutiny intensified.
And I can't say I disagree. I do think that she would have jumped on it had it worked out that way. But that does raise some eyebrows for people, or raise their suspicions on what really happened, since she didn't.
Whether viewers agreed or not, the argument stuck because it explained a pattern. Every time pressure mounted, the focus shifted back to pregnancy, stress, and emotional hardship, and the conversation stopped there. But once people started noticing that pattern, its power weakened. Instead of silencing criticism, it provoked more of it. People began asking, if everything is genuine, why does it need so much protection? By the time all these pieces were laid out together, the controversy became about something much bigger than pregnancy photos or hospital timelines. It became about trust.
and Harry already had a strained relationship with the British press and just the press in general before the pregnancy, before the birth of Archie. Their attempts to maintain...
Once people felt the story didn't fully add up, they started questioning everything, not angrily, but cautiously. And that's worse, because skepticism doesn't shout. It lingers.
And manipulative, the surrogacy rumors really started to gain momentum, especially when you compare it to the openness of Prince William and Princess Catherine. It just made
the damage wasn't a single allegation. It was the accumulation, the shifting timelines, the alleged documents, the staged optics, the silence. Together, they eroded confidence in a narrative that had been presented so confidently to the world. And when explanation is replaced by silence, doubt fills the gap. People connect their own dots. They form their own conclusions. And those conclusions harden with time. This wasn't a scandal that exploded. It seeped slowly, quietly, persistently. And once public trust cracks, it doesn't heal easily. Every future claim gets examined harder. Every emotional appeal meets resistance. The benefit of the doubt disappears. That's the real fallout here. Not embarrassment, not headlines, but credibility. Once questioned, it never quite returns the same way again.